30 years on, Rayman is still looking great. And to celebrate, he's been given a collection of his very first adventure. 5 game versions, a prototype, different enhancements, and bonus content, all for the price of a single, unaltered GBA game. I did find it a bit funny we'd be given the same game 5 times. I mean, I knew there were slight differences between versions, but as I went through my playthroughs, I started to really see the variations, both in the versions themselves, and with their implementations in the collection. So I guess version differences is the best place to start. The PS1 game was the first release. I've always seen it as the go-to version, and it's the one I spent countless hours retrying constantly on all those years ago. This collection calls it the definitive version, and I'm sure there's some debate between this one and the Saturn game, but we'll stick to the ones included. The brick wall will burst apart to begin our opening scene, fully animated with gorgeous visuals, all being narrated by our magician friend with spoken voice lines.
Rayman to the rescue!
Still looks amazing all these years later, though I wish they would have remastered it for the collection. The PS1 title screen sports a purple background, the iconic Rayman logo, and an animated start prompt. The second game version we're looking at was released third out of the ones in the collection, and it's Rayman for the PC, or MS-DOS. Similar in many ways to the PS1 game, but different in other ways. It will open up with this walking hand animation where Rayman will put himself together piece by piece. It should then lead into the same animation we looked at before, but it doesn't. Don't know why, but that intro is not present in the collection, but here's proof it exists outside of it. The title screen is similar to the PlayStation one, with the backdrop and logo, but it's also cluttered up with selections. The third version I played is actually the second one released, but the first to be developed. Rayman for the Atari Jaguar. It will be primitive in many ways, and doesn't benefit much from being on a cartridge instead of a CD-ROM. The intro is the origin of that walking hand animation, though he pieces himself together over a black background in this one. He then poses in front of a blue backdrop with the logo crashing down. This will serve as the title screen, with Rayman standing still. As for the opening scene in this one, there is no animation or voiced narration. In fact, the magician isn't even shown. Text and pictures tell us the story, with 3 of the images depicting the same scenes from the animation, while 2 images are unique to this intro. The 4th and final version we'll be comparing is Rayman Advance. This Game Boy Advance port was put together by Digital Eclipse, the same name behind this collection, so that's a cool full circle moment. Some compromises had to be made to get Rayman playable in the palm of your hands. Oh, we've come a long way. The opening will consist of stills from the animated intro, with animations done over top. And the magician will talk to us through text, not voice. The title screen will be the static image with the advanced subtitle. Let's actually get into the games. Upon starting any of these games, the map screen will not be filled out, but I want to go over the map and related quirks before the levels. So on PS1, there is a map element not seen in other versions. In the Bandland area, you can catch a glimpse of this purple present floating in the sky. Entering a level and returning will reveal more of it within our binocular vision. You can see on PC, this area is just a blue circle in the clouds. On the Jag, it is just slightly visible, being able to see the corner of it, but this version has a more restricted view of the map. Notice the save icon over here goes down, instead of up, like in all the other versions. Rayman will be seen running on the Jaguar map too, where he's casually walking in the others. When he stops at a level, you'll notice he stands behind the icon. He does that on PS1 and DOS too, but Advance, that has him standing in front of it. Standing still too long will have an effect in the PC game, where we'll see the binocular vision narrow and scan the map, while all the letters dance around like crazy. This screensaver effect won't be seen elsewhere, but there's another similar visual quirk on PC when loading into the map, where Mr. Dark will look around for us as his eyes adjust. Letting our own eyes adjust to the Jag version, we'll notice just how colorful the level font is. All other games stick to one color per level. The PS1 and DOS versions share much of the same font colors, but the world text up top will differ on one area. Picture City is a vibrant purple on PS1, but a more subdued tan on PC. Jaguar has it red, while also making Bandland pink instead of yellow, and Cave of Skops yellow instead of red. On the Game Boy Advance game, everything is blue, no matter what. Okay, enough colors. Jumping into a level, Rayman will have this animation where he pieces himself together on the PlayStation. In all other versions covered, he will simply have his landing animation. Also on PlayStation, the transition will always be this rolling scroll animation with the appropriate level art. Rayman on PC has gone wild with transitions. Sure, there's a roll, but with a ripple. We'll see a slide, a twist, glass breaking, a ball bouncing, interlacing images, a flip, a twirl, pieces coming together, and a page turn. That is a lot. In contrast, we will see on the Jag version, it doesn't have a transition. It should though. Strange it's not present in the collection version, but running the Jag game on my computer shows the proper shrinking transition. The barn door transition within the levels is still present though. There also is no level art in any rendition of the Jag game. Lastly, the GBA version has no transitions at all, which is understandable, but it does retain the level art. Alright, we're almost into the actual game. Let's jump into the Pink Plant Woods and talk about screens. Every version in this collection has a CRT or LCD filter on by default. Fair warning, I immediately turn these off. I get the idea behind them, but digital filters never live up to an actual CRT, and personally, I don't like how it darkens and muddies things up. It's a neat effect though, so it's cool that anyone who enjoys these can use them. Each version also has a different border and defaults to a smaller screen size, apart from the PS1 game. I tend to maximize screen size without horizontal stretching. And you can call me boring, but black borders all the way. Okay, so the PS1 Rayman game would originally be in a 4:3 aspect ratio, but new to this collection, you can play it in a modern full screen, bringing it from 4:3 to 16:9, or to get those numbers a bit closer, from a 12:9 to a 16:9. This is not stretching the image, but actually expanding it on the horizontal axis. This can be super helpful to see what's ahead, and otherwise, just looks real nice. This is the only game version that got this treatment though. Looking at the PC game, you will see it's almost in full screen already. That is because DOS games would output a 16:10 aspect ratio, 8:5 simplified, while most monitors remained 4:3. We don't have to get into why that is. But most of our screen is filled, and you may have noticed Rayman looks a bit larger. Well, the field of view wasn't expanded to give us more horizontal real estate, and it wasn't stretched either. Instead, our viewable picture is zoomed in and cropped, so we'll be able to see less overhead. Looking at the Jaguar, we'll see it's not exactly 4:3 due to the black borders. This seems to be roughly a 10:7 for the used screen space. I don't know the technical details of how the Jag exports video, but looking at the emulation, it seems those black bars are programmed into the game itself. Still, they're consistent as far as I can see, so the collection could have gotten away with giving it a 7% zoom to fill the vertical axis. Oh well. The Game Boy Advance screen has an aspect ratio of 3:2, and you can expect some heavy screen crunch due to the reduced resolution. Okay, now that our screens are set, we'll look at what those screens will display. First off, you will notice that the background for the PS1, DOS, and GBA all have this lush jungle scene, but the Jaguar instead has this swamp. Now, since all three following parts of the Pink Plant Woods, in every version, use the swamp background, and since the Jag is the original, I'm guessing it's all thematically supposed to be Rayman emerging from the gloomy swamps in the beginning, and this was changed to make the starting level much more vibrant, just like another iconic mascot platformer's starting levels. I'll be sure to point out any background swaps as we come to them. Now, sticking to backdrops, you will see the PlayStation has parallax, letting separate background layers move in different ways for perspective. A later Jaguar jungle background will not use any parallax, and the Game Boy Advance surprisingly does have some amount of parallax, though you will notice less layers are used for the water section. So that brings us to PC. You will see there is no parallax scrolling used, and for my whole playthrough, I thought that's just how the DOS version was. Turns out, there is an option to enable it, and the effect is shown here, but this collection disables that toggle. I can only guess that's due to some emulation issues, but I can't be sure. Apart from background effects, there is also some foreground elements in the PlayStation game. These are present on the Jaguar, despite its static backdrops, and the PC doesn't have foreground, even with the parallax enabled. The Game Boy Advance lacks this as well. Middle grounds aren't without their changes either. Here on the PlayStation, we'll have a berry bush and a pink coral looking plant. The PC keeps the berries, but replaces the other plant with these two ferns, dark green and red. And the Jag has no berry bush or the other two plants, having only these small pillar plants instead. And that's just the first level. These types of variations could apply anywhere in the game, so keep an eye out for those differences. One intriguing thing about the Jag version is there will be many different butterflies, red ones, yellow ones, green, pink. In all other versions featured, the butterflies will only be blue. Rayman must have gotten impatient waiting for us to start, so let's look at his idle animations. On the Jag, he does this little shuffle. His mouth will move, but there's no voice. On PlayStation, he'll do this search and shrug combo, and you can hear what I can only guess is a high-pitched cough or throat clear. Odd. PC steps things up. He'll have the same PS1 animation, but on top of that, he'll do a few shouts.
Hey, you!
Accompanied by a voice for Rayman.
Yo, dude!
And my favorite?
I'm waiting!
Sounds familiar.
I'm waiting!
His last outburst will simply be a throat clear. Many aspects of the PC game were implemented in the GBA game, so you'll see the shout animation, but no voice will be used. Interestingly though, the last one will be present. There's some other sound effect differences. The tings in the PS1 game really do sound like the onomatopoeia for the word ting. On Jaguar, it's similar, but sounds pitched down some and less bright. And then on PC and GBA, they've got an almost clacking sound to them. Standing near an edge on PS1 will give Rayman a higher pitched vocalization. On DOS, it's the same voice, but a lower pitch. But on Jag, it will be completely silent voice-wise. It will play the landing sound effect though. Also note that Jag Rayman has no backwards ledge animation. He does in all the others. Clearing a PS1 level will give us this iconic sound. That same yeah is on PC, but the jingle is missing. And the background music continues to play. Advance is the same, but slightly sped up. On Jaguar, he doesn't shout, but a different jingle will play. Don't forget the life and power-up at the beginning. Notice how on the Game Boy Advance, Rayman starts with 5 lives instead of 3, and has 4 hit points instead of 3. Collecting that item brings him to a max health of 6, as opposed to 5. Upon starting any level on the Jag, we'll see those familiar colored letters spell out action. It's much the same if you get a game over. In related news, getting hurt will give Rayman a yelp in all versions. With the exception of the Jaguar, where you'll hear this instead. Get hit enough, or fall where you shouldn't, and you'll hear this fail jingle on PS1 and DOS. On Jag and GBA, you'll hear nothing on a fall. But a sound effect when losing all health. The event trigger sounds are all similar, but not exact. And take note of the advanced version. Every hidden trigger in the game now has a visible sparkle, so you know what to activate without aimlessly guessing. Rayman's only special ability upon starting will be his grimace, and it sounds like this. That is in all versions apart from the Jag, where just like his other voice lines, it's silent. It's more than just a funny face though, as Rayman can use it to scare off these tall living stones. Well, except it doesn't work on Jaguar. Instead, that same scared animation will play, but the enemy runs towards Rayman, not away from him. This actually happens regardless if you use the Grimace or not. Part 2 of the Pink Plant Woods is the first area cages appear. You will find one here on PS1, and on PC, it's empty. Instead, you will find one here on PC, and on PlayStation, empty. Right, so when making the PC port, they decided to switch around many of the cage locations. I don't know why, but it does add variation. Just be sure you've got the right guide if you're using one. The Jaguar game will have the same placement as PS1, and the Advance will have the same placement as PC. But that doesn't mean every single cage is changed. Just look at this one over here, present in all versions. I'm not going to cover every cage change, cause we'd be here all day, but I will point out a few that stood out to me. Moving on, we meet Betilla the Fairy, who will give us our needed ability upgrades. Interestingly, the PlayStation version is the only game featured to give Betilla any sort of voice. I couldn't isolate it, as it's strangely on the music layer, not the sound effects layer, but you can hear a bit during a convenient gap in the music. More of a humming than actual words. This is absent even on the PC version, which you'll see why that's odd in a bit. Sounds aside, all words will be written in text. On PS1, it's all pink, except for this one line being green. Strange. On DOS, all Betilla text will be green. Jaguar goes back to pink, but with a difference in wording, and the instruction will be separated from Betilla's speech, being shown in green. Advance will once again be all blue text, just like on the map. The last line will linger on screen for all versions until you finish the level, but I only really noticed it on GBA since there is no cropping, so the text overlays the level as you play it. That cropping has quite an effect on the PC version, as it's already cropped above from the zoom, so it's easier to overlook your destination over your head. Our first gained ability will be Rayman's Fist, and even that has a different sound effect on Jaguar. It may look like it can be thrown further on GBA, but that's just an illusion due to the screen size. Finally, you can see that the Golden Fist will be used as a text transition in all games, apart from the Jaguar. Okay, we're finally out of the first level. Let's move on to Anguish Lagoon. This is the first level that has the jungle backdrop across all versions, and you'll see that even that has some differences. On PS1 and JAG, this tree has a darker green, and the plant to the right is purple. On PC and GBA, the tree is more saturated, and the other plant is now yellow. Though I wanted to look at the background for another reason. In all games, I did a swing test to see how smooth the background scrolls. It's more or less jittery, depending on the version, but what really intrigued me is the PlayStation game has a much larger horizontal scroll, really selling the illusion of Rayman swinging through the environment. I also noticed Rayman won't have this hair-flowing animation on Jaguar. Part 2 of this level will feature our first boss fight. We'll meet him below. First, I want to point out a few things. You'll notice on the Anniversary PlayStation version, this is one of the sections that will default to a 4:3 aspect ratio, as there is no horizontal scrolling here. On Game Boy, there is scrolling, due to the screen crunch, but that screen will lock upon landing, so the battle takes place in a fixed screen space. The intriguing thing is, though, you can change where you want that screen to lock prior to landing. This should have no effect on your fight, though. While falling, you may notice a background swap. PS1 and JAG use the typical jungle scene, but interestingly, PC and GBA use a different backdrop with these vines. We'll see this background soon, but it's cool to have it here since it otherwise is only used in one location. All versions have a fist power-up here, but only the PlayStation game has a health upgrade up top. Down below, we'll face our boss, and I have to say, I didn't learn this until much later, but this guy is not the big boss Moskito, but a different flying insect, later named Bzzit, or Bzzit, or however you pronounce it in Culicidae. This bug distinction will be important a bit later. In any case, Rayman is scared, except on the Jaguar, where Rayman fears no boss. Small change, but Bzzit's icon faces left on PlayStation, and right elsewhere. Once you dwindle that health bar down, you'll see Rayman celebrate with a dance in all versions before befriending the fallen bug. On Jag, Bzzit has only white hands, where in the other versions they're pink. Well, mostly. They also turn white at times. Exclusive to the PC game, we'll have a black screen animation to transition to Part 3. And exclusive to the PS1, we'll have that pieced together animation, but with Bzzit participating too. On the Jag, you'll see the stage starts with Rayman waving. Yeah, the PC game recycles this animation for that black screen transition. Big change coming up. In 3 of the versions, Rayman will throw his punch as Bzzit flies along, but on the Jag, Bzzit gets a fun change. He will shoot at enemies from his proboscis, while Rayman keeps his fists to himself. Also, Bzzit will be in his high speed state the entire time, where on other versions, that's reserved for the speed up section late in the level. The speed doesn't increase on Jag. The background scrolling can be quite dizzying on Game Boy due to how much it scrolls vertically. Towards the end of this section, there will be spike fruit to avoid. On Jaguar, they will be in a much different arrangement. There's also plenty of tings to collect here, though on Jag, they'll be in quite a different shape. You'll see 4 numbers, 1, 3, 6, and 4. It's a secret hint, just remember it for later. Completing the level will also be different depending on your game. On Jaguar, Bzzit will fly off screen, while Rayman does a victory handstand, then waves at us. In all other versions, Bzzit screeches to a halt, and we can free fly until we touch the sign. Him and Bzzit will also do this sort of shrugging pose. DOS has another black screen Bzzit transition, once again recycling a Jag animation. The victory handstand we just saw, it works well as a farewell to our bug friend. We'll then be given our second ability, the power to hang. Interestingly, none of the text lingers this time around. The hang in the Jag version will sometimes have Rayman's hand further on the platform, whereas it's always right on the edge in the others. But to accompany this, his hang also feels different on the Jag. I'm not sure how to put it into words. Maybe it's a proximity thing, or a difference in how each version snaps him to the ledge. What I can say is on the non-Jag games, going from a hang to a jump will always put Rayman on top of the ledge, sometimes with his arms flailing. But on the Jag, only his far hang will let him jump up top, while his edge hang will have him jump right back into that position. We'll hang more later. The next level will be the Swamps of Forgetfulness. Except that name was forgotten on the Jaguar, as it's called the Forgotten Swamps instead. This is an exciting level, as it's the one where we meet our next friend, Tarayzan. This is how he sounds on PlayStation. And this is how he sounds on PC, with the usual pitch shift. Oh yeah, also he says this on PC.
Hey, Rayman! Take this magic seed!
Yeah, a few of our NPC encounters will have been given a voice line. That's pretty exciting, but this is also what I meant when I said it's odd Betilla is voiceless on PC. Speaking of the voiceless, the Jag version will have a completely silent Tarayzan. While the advanced game only has his plea for help, but no talking or ululation when leaving. Now we have our magic seed, which gives us the one-time ability to grow these platform plants. In most versions, the floodwaters will begin to rise as soon as Rayman sprouts it. Though on the Jaguar, the water will wait for us until we jump to the height of the first ledge. As we ascend, let's look at our environment. This level features the vine background I mentioned at the Bzzit battle, great for vertical scrolling. You'll see the Anniversary Edition PlayStation game is back to 4.3. On GBA, this entire section utilizes a horizontal scroll. As for weather effects, on PS1 it is raining pretty heavily, the cause of the flood. On DOS, there is less rain, but it is now dark, with occasional lightning strikes. Over on the Jag, there is no rain or darkness, and the same can be said for the Game Boy Advance. Moving to parts 2 and 3 of this stage, this is an interesting occasion where the PS1 game uses the swamp background for the swamp level, while the 3 other versions use the bright jungle backdrop. Part 3 on PC and Game Boy feature an upper area to the level where a cage can be found. This is empty on PS1 and Jag. The final level in the Dream Forest will be Moskito's Nest. I get this weird glitch on Game Boy where jumping sank Rayman into the water. In Part 2, this spike swing may be missing on Advance, but there's an addition up above. This version added 6 new photo booths to the game to make some sections a bit easier, so I'll point out the others as we come to them. Just after that ledge, we'll have these water lilies to jump across. On PlayStation, the big solid ones will have pink bow ties, while the smaller sinking ones will have red. I really like this visual separation to make their lack of stability more distinct. Unfortunately, on all other versions featured, these all will be pink. At least you get a split-second delay. That is not the case on Jaguar, where it will begin to fall as soon as you land on it. In Part 3 of this level, we are being chased by a familiar-looking bug. That is not Bzzit, though. It is Mr. Moskito himself. This is where things get confusing. The Jaguar version got all Bzzit and Moskito distinctions right, showing our earlier Bzzit as pink, and our current Mr. Moskito as red. PlayStation, DOS, and Game Boy all incorrectly show pink during the chase. Remember that for Part 5. Another color difference is with the giant spike fruit Moskito is carrying. It's purple on PS1 and on Jaguar, but on PC and GBA, it's red. That's not the only spike fruit discrepancy. On PC, these small ones are red, and they bounce. PlayStation, they're yellow, and they bounce. But on Jaguar, They're also yellow, but they won't bounce. Advance is red, like on PC, but you probably won't see them bounce. They do though. In fact, you'll hardly even see Moskito and his giant red spike fruit anyway. We'll get a better look at him at the end of the level. On PC, you will see that he stops at the edge of the screen and won't proceed. It's the same for PlayStation, but with the widescreen feature on, he's a bit further back at the fourth vine. Funny thing is, we can switch that live and watch him move back and forth to adapt to the changing screen edge. The Jaguar game is the only one where he flies away at the end. And then there's Game Boy Advance. In this version, Moskito is relentless. He will not stop coming after you until you touch that level end sign. What a sore loser. Moving on to Part 4. On PlayStation, you will see a neat effect not present in the other covered versions. This wispy fog as we traverse the level. Take note of the grass on PS1 and JAG, cause on the PC and GBA, we're on a tree log instead. This is a pretty cool variation in the level design, and much of the obstacles are altered because of it. Finally, in Part 5, we face off against Mr. Moskito. Notice that backdrop in all versions resembles the logs we just saw in 2 of the games. Looking at Moskito himself, we'll see the appropriate dark red not only in the Jaguar game, but on the PlayStation as well. Remember, the wrong pink one was shown 2 levels ago in this version. At least they got this one right. The games that didn't get it right again are the PC and Game Boy. Makes it look like we're fighting our new friend Bzzit instead. There's another missing color distinction. On PS1 and Jaguar, the small spike fruits will be yellow, medium-sized are red, and larger ones are purple. Though in the PC game, all 3 of these will be red. Likewise for the advanced version, only there won't even be a large one present. Also notice how low Moskito has to fly. This makes the medium spike balls look funny with an exaggerated bounce. On Jaguar, you'll have a free health power-up to use at any time. When you win on Jag, Rayman will simply strike a victory pose. In the other 3, he will do a little dance. On PC, there's an added voice line.
Excellent!
And there'll also be another black screen animation with Rayman driving an invisible car? Must be training for Rayman Kart. We'll then find Betilla again, and I want you to take a look at the scene behind us. On PlayStation, we'll have the swamp, like the rest of the level. PC will switch it to the bright jungle background, and on Jag, it will retain Moskito's tree lair from her battle, just with the added grass elements. Betilla's instruction text will not turn green this time. The power she gives us is the ability to grab using these flying O-rings. In most versions, you'll see this sparkling line to attach Rayman to his swing target. Though on the Jag, you'll notice this tether is invisible. So we swing out of the Dream Forest, and we can move on to our next world, Bandland. I've always loved this one. Here is Bongo Hills 1 on the PlayStation. Take note of the giant treble clef and the slippery staff lines leading us away from it. In the background, you will see these lush musical fields, and this will be our second backdrop with Parallax. Now let's look at it on the Jaguar. Immediately, you will notice his movement is quite different. Yeah, so any instance of Rayman sliding will simply have him walking instead on this version. This makes things a bit easier, though less exciting, and there will be some workarounds implemented. Since this is the Jag, there again is no parallax, so you'll see one unmoving image in the back. So now let's look at this same level on PC. Yeah, it's actually not the same level. The PC version switches out Bongo Hills 1 for a more earthy scene, bridging the gap between the Dream Forest and Bandland. Literally, look at this beautiful xylophone bridge. I don't know why this change was made, but I'll take it. It keeps things interesting. The higher part of the stage will resemble the typical Bandland experience, and there's even a treble clef with staff lines in this version too. The Game Boy Advance follows many conventions of the PC game, so we'll expect to see the PC Bongo Hills 1, right? No. It's not the PS1 version either. Instead, the GBA game skips over Part 1 entirely, bringing us to Bongo Hills 2. That means the usual cage found in the other versions had to be moved elsewhere, so I'll show you that once we get there. This also makes the Game Boy version of Bongo Hills 2 the only instance of that stage to feature an exit sign. So now that we've caught up to Bongo 2 in all versions, I want to get down and talk about a move Rayman has had since the start. It will become necessary to learn how to crawl, and that's done differently depending on the game. PlayStation has the smoothest way of doing it. Simply hold L1 or R1 and Rayman will crawl in that direction. You don't even have to crouch either. He'll go from a standing state to crawling. In fact, you need the shoulder buttons to crawl, since crouching and pressing left or right on the D-pad does nothing. Rayman on PC tripped me up a while when I started that playthrough. Pressing L1 does nothing, and R1 will bring up the pause and options menu. So in order to crawl, you must hold down to crouch, but even here, left and right won't get you moving. While crouched, you need to hold your jump button, and Rayman will do a continuous crawl in the direction you're facing. You can then switch directions with left or right, but that jump button must remain held. Jag is a bit different. You again have to crouch, but holding your jump button will exclusively crawl you to the right, while holding the punch button will crawl you to the left. Though in this version, left and right on the D-pad will get you moving accordingly. Finally, we have the advance game, where we also have that crouch plus left or right button combo. In fact, that's the only way to crawl in this one, as no shoulder or face button will move us. This also makes this the only version where you can go from a crouch to a jump. That could maybe come in handy. But let's get off the ground and jump down below. In all games, there are times where stepping on something you shouldn't will take you out immediately. The 3 non-Jag versions will all have Rayman do a hurt foot animation, while the 1 Jag version will simply have him do the usual Electoon split. Continuing on, this cage is in every version, and it usually requires backtracking from the end of the level. Though on the Advance, the door is wide open, no spikes will block the path. If you take the intended route, you'll hit this string of tings that are meant to make a song. Let's listen. Before finishing the level, I want to bring your attention to these platforms overhead. This is a good spot to show you 2 quirks of the Jag game. First off, you won't be able to simply jump up here in any other version. But on the Jaguar, Rayman actually has a slightly higher jump, making this sort of traversal possible. As we hang, notice how we can neutralize any threat in the other versions. But on Jag, Rayman cannot throw a punch while he hangs off the ledge. Ouch. Part 3 of this level is the one with the maraca rockets. These can get stuck beneath platforms in any game, but it's much more common on Jag. Rayman will also have the tendency to step off the maraca onto platforms on the Jag. Staying stuck for too long will have our maraca explode in all versions apart from the Jaguar. On GBA, the rockets will ascend much more slowly. On Jag, there's another difference, this time in the level design. In the other games, above the second photographer will be your typical drum ground. But on Jag, this instead has these multi-layered platforms suspended by flute pillars. And take a look at this cage location on PC. Simple enough, right? But prior to playing the PC version, I revisited certain levels on PS1 to get the remaining Electoon cages, and this is when I realized the two different games had different locations. As it turns out, I was using a PC guide. I'm sure you could imagine the frustration of meeting a blocked up entrance with spikes. Personal stories aside, let's move on to part 4. Immediately, on PS1 and PC, you will notice how dark it is here. The other two versions keep the light on. The Jag version even keeps the bright Bongo Hills backdrop. The PC and GBA have this cloudy star background, and PS1 has this, which I think is from the same image, but maybe a different part of it? Looking up, the wall above will be inaccessible on PlayStation and Jag, though going up there on the PC will reveal tings arranged to spell the word great. Huh, that is great. What's better, though, is the GBA instead spells out Rayman up here. Neat stuff. Part 5 of this level has a cage worth mentioning. On PS1, this cage was a bit frustrating before knowing what to do. Turns out, you have to go a bit further in the level to reach this center wall, so you can shrink and make your way back, so that you can then fit through and rise to the cage. On PC, they make it so much easier, giving you that magic shrinking elf right near the cage. That center wall area isn't even needed. Jaguar is the easiest one. No spike balls will block your way, so there's no shrinking necessary. In fact, there is no shrinking mechanic in this version anyway, so there will be some small workarounds for Big Rayman. Also, that center wall will be completely enclosed, and this left wall will be gone entirely. The advanced version is the same as PC, but it's only here that I realized, once shrinking, that Rayman stands in front of the cages on GBA and PC, where he's behind them in the other two. It's almost like Rayman is locked up with the old Electoons. Part 6 is the location of our new cage from the missing Part 1, so the GBA is the only featured version to have a cage here. You can access it from the usual opening on the right, but there's also a new drop-down from above that is blocked in all other games. While we're standing here, I've got to share a really intriguing revelation. So you've probably noticed a difference in the clouds. Solid ones look like this, and disappearing ones look like this. Some visual distinction is always nice, but for my entire Rayman playing life, I figured these clouds just had an extra dark spot or shadow in the center. That is until I played the Jaguar game for the first time just recently. Turns out, those have been eyes this entire time. It's just that in every other version, they just never bothered to open them. That is wild. Why shouldn't the clouds have visible eyes? Speaking of eyes, the enemy Lightning Eyes will shoot lightning out of his eyes. but not always. On Game Boy Advance, these ones here keep their angry expressions, but are left without any ammo. It's the same for these Mad Drummer enemies, who would usually blast bolts at us, but they don't on Advance. Moving on to Allegro Presto. This is a very slide-heavy level, at least in the slide-enabled games. Yeah, so I'll show you some of the level alterations for the walking Rayman. There will be extra gaps here, 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 and down here on Jag, and another before the cage. And there will be a cloud here, here, and here to help you across. A hunter has been added here and right here, as you don't have to worry about sliding into him. Typically, you'd use the momentum from your slide to reach this high cage. Luckily on Jag, Rayman's extra jump height helps us out. On Game Boy, there's an additional cloud to make it easier. And once up, you'll see the cage has strangely sunk below the ground in this version. Allegro Presto 2 is one I remember vividly from when I was a kid. Not as difficult as I remembered it. It's been made easier on GBA by not having the platforms narrow as you ascend, so they stay wide for better footing. With there being no slide mechanic on Jag, this is handled a bit different. We still have our trumpets, not so noisy in this one. But Rayman's feet will stay planted. It's only when you jump that you'll be blown away, and there's quite a few extra clouds to get you to the next blowhorn. Now that we've climbed our way up, I'll show you an extra area. On PlayStation and Jag, this is the extent of our top section. Though on PC, there will be an extra trumpet who can send you to a cage, and furthermore, to a place with 4 lives. Since GBA has the same layout, you can reach that cage, though it doesn't seem possible to reach the 4 lives. That is due to the advanced version giving you a lower max speed from sliding, probably the reason for that earlier cloud as well. Dang, so close to it too. Down below, we can be pooled by an inhale, though not on Jaguar. And further down is a Battle of the Bands, though Jag omits this as well, but there is an extra hunter below. Allegro 3 has maracas instead of slidey ground on Jag, and PC/GBA has a lower cage. Then Allegro 4 has an early appearance from Mr. Sax. He looks huge on Advance. You won't see him on the Jaguar since this entire stage is skipped over. Finally, we're given our next Betilla power, the helicopter ability. Seems the same in all games. What's not the same is there's a life down here on PC, and there's not on PS1. Jaguar won't even have an opening here. Our next level will be Gong Heights, a level notable for its beautiful sunset background, unless you're playing on Jag, where it instead uses the same cloud background from Allegro Presto. Since we are above the clouds, let's look to this level's many pitfalls. On PS1, you'll see Rayman has a high fall animation, as well as the proper death animation. PC and GBA will not have a high fall animation, but the death animation is intact. And the Jaguar has neither. The screen just freezes a second before turning black and loading us in again. Weird. What's even more weird is I later found out that falling animation is in fact in every game. It's just not very consistent in its usage across all the games. So, yeah. PC and GBA have a cool extra spot above. See? I told you it was cool. This area is not accessible in the other two games. It leads to a flute with a cage, then a downward staircase of clouds. Let's go down further. I mentioned the GBA game has extra photographers, but this one is actually an extra photo booth included in the DOS game prior. On PS1 and JAG, there's no checkpoint, instead having two flutes, also with a cage. Towards the end, this very last Tibetan monk will have the usual string of crystal balls in the PC and Game Boy game, but on PS1 and JAG, he instead tosses around one giant crystal ball. Whichever one you take, it leads us to the end of Part 1. In Part 2 of Gong Heights, it will begin to snow just past the second set of eyes on PlayStation, though on DOS, it will begin snowing almost immediately near the start. Also, there is no second eyes in this one. Both the Game Boy Advance and the Jaguar will predictably have no snow at all. This is also our first auto-scroll level. If the invisible wall catches up to you on PS1 or DOS, Rayman will yelp, then dissipate, losing a life. On Jaguar, he'll also lose a life, but there will be no animation. He's off-screen anyway. The auto-scroll mechanic is completely absent on GBA. That's all for Gong Heights. Let's move on to Mr. Sax's Hullabaloo. Oh, sorry, it's missing an O on PlayStation. It should be Hullabaloo, like in the other games. Once inside, we'll see that same cloud backdrop again on Jaguar, though the other games switched it to a more atmospheric cloud background with twinkling stars. In all sliding versions, there will be a spot where we shrink and surf below this drum, then grow and use our momentum to reach this high flute. But the Jag has none of that, so he'll walk, stay the same size, and casually stroll below the drum, head and all. He doesn't even need to crawl. And this flute is another example of his heightened jump on Jag. Here's some typical gaps, like back in Allegro, and then this lower layer is missing on Jag, so we'll have to take the high road instead. On Advance, here's one of those new photo booths, and this one is funny to me since it's hanging off the edge of the cloud ledge. Further on, we'll have our only appearance of the symbol enemy. On Advance, it's not difficult to send Rayman through the bottom symbol. Jaguar has a couple quirks as well. This is the only version in which you can stand on the top of the symbol. Pretty cool. When you ride it properly, you may find that ducking down isn't a constant. Strangely, the game will force Rayman to stand before the symbols crash together. This can lead to a disastrous effect. Reaching the other side, we can go up for a notable cage on PC and Game Boy, nestled within the funny face. On PlayStation and Jaguar, it's in a more boring spot below. Part 2 of this level is a pretty interesting one. It's a chase sequence with Mr. Sax, and any damage you deal will carry over to the actual fight. It acts as another auto-scroll section with the deadly wall. That is with the exception of the GBA, sort of. You can stay behind and reverse the roles, having Rayman chase the saxophone instead, or you can let him pass you and go backwards in the level. But you will eventually find that auto-scroll complete with its insta-death attributes, so it's not totally absent from this game, it's just been given a hefty delay. Pretty interesting. The battle seems pretty standard in all games, though it's rather cluttered in the GBA version. Mr. Sax will dance upon defeat in all games, and Rayman will join him in most. But on Jag, Rayman instead does his level clear pose. With that, Bandland has reached its quota, and we'll climb on to Blue Mountains. The first level here is Twilight Gulch, and it's similar in all versions, except I found a few quirks on GBA. The first one was pretty frustrating. So in any other version, you'll get this cloud here to appear pretty easily, but I was stuck here for a long time on GBA, which is strange, cause that's the 4th version I played, so I definitely knew what to do. Or so I thought, anyway. The problem was, even though I was reaching the trigger point, it wouldn't do anything since I wasn't looking at it. But holding up and jumping? Yeah, that did the trick. Okay then. Further on, there's a low cloud that you ride to the edge of the stage. Without much thought, I jumped to this weird platform that didn't want to let me on. And then I was stuck, since that cloud never comes back. Double checking the other versions, I found the cloud isn't supposed to go that far, though I'm sure it does, for screen-related reasons. So it becomes pretty clear you're meant to punch your life or cage to retrieve it, since it doesn't seem possible to actually reach that platform elsewhere. On Jag, that cage is protected by spikes. Back on solid ground, we'll come face to face with these Rockman enemies, and they're notorious for not staying down after being defeated. Well, except they do on advance. Yup, in this version, they only need to be knocked down once, and they won't bother you again. That's a relief. Part 2 of the Gulch is where Mr. Stone first spots us, and he'll chase after us. Interestingly, you can look up on PlayStation and see the bottom of his foot as he waits for us to pass. On GBA, we'll be given an icon on the bottom left to remind us we're being pursued, since we won't be able to see him very well. If you do stop to look back, you'll find him stopping as well and doing a little arm flailing attack. Interesting. He doesn't do that in the other versions, opting to simply mow you down instead. Though that animation is present if you attempt to jump backwards over his head. If you need a break, you can rest down below where Mr. Stone won't follow. On GBA, there's even a photo booth here, though the checkpoint isn't all that necessary, since coming down here ends the chase on Game Boy. On PlayStation, you'll see he decides to wait for us. Hi. Part 2 of the chase will begin. On Jaguar, he won't be prompted to move until you start walking, so you have time to give him a piece of your mind. Or fist. Though of course, he's unaffected. If you never did drop down to rest, the chase would proceed as one long sequence, though Mr. Stone will be moving faster than you. On GBA, it also extends to these boulders, but Mr. Stone won't drop down, so he ends the chase early either way. Can we take a moment to mention how scary his scream is? I'm sure you could guess that he's mute on Jaguar. He is not completely silent though. His footsteps will have a percussive clang to them in this version. And in the others, it sounds more like a continuous rolling boulder. Let's resume. The chase will lead us to this lower area where we break magma balls as the big guy stomps above. Though on GBA, it's another photo booth instead. On Jaguar, the lower level here is not enclosed, so you can go ahead of the Stomping Stone Man and see that he makes his exit by flying up. There's also less magma balls to slow us down. Our second Blue Mountain level will be the hard rocks, and I'll again point you to the background. Plenty of purples on PlayStation and Jag to resemble distant cliff faces. On PC and Game Boy, those cliffs are much closer and much more defined. Staying in Part 1 on Game Boy, there's an extra cloud here. Funny thing about it though, is it looks like a solid cloud. Turns out, it's not. It's a disappearing cloud, just with the wrong sprite. Weird. Further on, we'll find another GBA photographer added to the level. But what stands out about this guy is he's right near the end sign. Look, I know it's just a save point for if you want to go this optional route towards the second end sign. It doesn't make it any less funny to me to see a checkpoint next to the end goal though. Part 2 of the Hard Rocks will feature another auto-scroll section with the same quirks as before. Normal on PS1 and DOS, absent on GBA, though Jaguar will only have half of it. The first part will auto-scroll like expected, but the second part will let you go at your own pace. Hard Rocks 3 is a steep climb, though Advance gives you a break from the hazards, leaving out these two rockmen guarding the exit. Already, we're at the last of the Blue Mountain levels, and it's the most interesting of the three, Mr. Stone's Peaks. Part 1 is quite fun as we meet our next friend. The level opens up to a cozy cottage on the cliffside, where the musician is sobbing over his broken guitar. Well, it's a bit different on Jag. The musician doesn't cry, and you can't even see his smashed guitar beneath the boulder. This is the only big rock you can climb on though. The other three versions just have you walk in front of it. For another set-piece change, see how the second pair of lovebirds are on a tree on PS1 and Jag. On PC, and by extension the GBA, the birds instead perch upon a rock pillar. In all versions, we'll punch the boulder to carve a new hard rock guitar. Mostly it's done in pieces, but on Jag, it's obliterated all at once. On PlayStation, we'll get to hear the musician try out a few chords on his new instrument. In all other versions, just the standard background music will play. Just like Tarayzan, the musician has found his voice on the PC game.
Thanks, Rayman, baby. This super helicopter power is for you.
And now that he's grooving again, we can take advantage of his temporary potion. He'll toss it to us in most games, but it's already sitting there on Jag. With this, we can fly continuously with Rayman's helicopter hair. Though I'm sure you can guess, there's even changes in this ability. On PS1 and Jaguar, you'll find that Rayman's hair is dyed purple and blue as he hovers. But on the PC and GBA, it's his standard yellow hair. How boring. Rayman's not the only one with yellow hair though. Exclusive to the Jaguar version, these flying Antitoons will have Rayman's signature blonde hair, but only when flying. Interesting. This continual helicopter power doesn't only differ in appearance. The control of it on Jaguar is much less polished than on the other games. If you look at the PlayStation game, keeping a steady rhythm while tapping the jump button will always bring Rayman to the same level of altitude, but on Jag, things are much less uniform. You'll have to tap faster, and there's no leveling out the fly height, making traversal a bit less predictable. Part 2 of the peaks will feature a slowly draining body of water and a weighted slab threatening to submerge us. On PS1, that slab will begin sinking immediately upon starting the level, but on PC and GBA, it gives us some leeway by waiting until we move far enough. Actually, it's much more forgiving in other aspects on GBA by sinking more slowly, leaving a much larger gap between it and the water, and having weaker ropes that cut more quickly. Failing to sever that twine will drown Rayman long before you reach the bottom on PS1 and PC. Though with the GBA's extended gap, you can reach the bottom where the water is seen waiting on the slab instead of draining completely. So how about this level on Jaguar? Well, it doesn't exist. Finishing Stone Peaks 1 will lead right into Part 3. That means the usual cage here is moved to later on. The third part features more water, this time rising, and this should behave pretty similarly in all games, except for the GBA. The water will rise very slowly in this version, and if that wasn't easy enough, if it catches up to you, it will stop completely until you ascend a bit further. How considerate. Part 4 will feature lots of snow, and it's quite slippy in the 3 sliding games. Naturally on Jag, it will act as normal ground, with no slides, just like back in Bandland. That snow takes a more visual approach on PS1 and PC, like in Gong Heights, but there's an oddity on the Anniversary PS1 version. It was like this before, but it's easier to see against the darker background, but the snow effect is still in its native 4:3 aspect ratio, and it hasn't been extended or stretched for the 16:9 screen. These magma rocks on the tiny ledges can be difficult to maneuver in 3 of the games, but Advance switches these out for marching Electoons. This Ting arrangement spells out yes on PS1, DOS, and GBA, but it's just a simple pattern on Jaguar. On PC and GBA, there's an intriguing cage down here requiring a leap of faith. This will result in death on PS1 and Jag. And finally, that Jag cage from the missing Part 2. It will appear at the end of the level, the same spot that Life appears on PlayStation. That nearby sign will lead us to this stage's boss, Mr. Stone. This will have a horizontal scroll in all versions, including the Anniversary PlayStation version, where it's locked to 4:3 despite the extra space on the sides. The clouds in the background differ a bit between the Jag and the other games, and the totem's face would typically have a crack in it, but he's spared that blemish on GBA. On DOS, there's another black screen animation following the battle. Next up, we will receive our final power from Betilla, the power to run. This will be done with our rightmost face button on the PS1, DOS, and Jaguar versions. But for the GBA, you'll have to press the right shoulder button. A simple tap will do on PS1, DOS, and GBA, but the Jag version requires you to hold it for the full duration of your run. Also, Rayman will typically do a nifty somersault from a running jump. He hasn't achieved this on the Jag game. And when ending a run, Rayman might screech to a halt, but he simply stops in place on the Jag. Not everything is missing on Jag though. In the other versions, gaining the run power will sadly replace the goofy grimace. But here, Rayman can hold on to his funny face for the entire game. Heck yeah! With Blue Mountains completed, we can move on to a much more creative world, Picture City. Eraser Plains is the first of 3 stages. Right away, we'll have a difference in backdrops. Jaguar will have this one with multicolored clouds, and you'll see this in most of this game's levels. DOS has that one too, but it won't stick around long. And then PS1 instead has this woodblock background. Looking towards the foreground, you'll find a sea of ink below on the PS1, PC, and Jaguar. On the GBA, this will be all dried up, though you would still lose all the same. To stay out of the ink, we'll use these pencils as stepping stones. On PlayStation, we'll have this long wavy bridge of pencils, then another further on leading straight to this yin-yang blockade. PC and GBA have that same first section, but the latter one is reduced from 9 pencils to 3, leaving a tricky gap. And then the Jag has no consecutive bridge of pencils in either spot, giving more of a challenge. To make things worse, the pencil's movements are more erratic here too. Going further, we'll come across this wall of 8 yin-yangs on PS1. On Jaguar, it's reduced to 3, and on PC, it's only 1. Reaching this high sparkle on PS1 will give us this secret helicopter potion that will drop down to the ground. It's the same in the Jaguar game too, though it stays airborne. On DOS and Game Boy, you will not find any potion here, but that's fine though, since there is no cage in this upper area, making this entire section pointless to visit in these games. On PS1 and Jag, we can fly here, though it's not necessary to reach it. And on the way back on Jag, we'll notice an extra gap in the flooring. Eraser Planes 2 will feature the wood background in all games, but notice the color differences. A soft brown on PS1, reddish brown on PC, orange on Game Boy, and an almost purple hue on Jaguar. Also on Jag, there will again be way less pencils than the other versions, but if we climb onto them, we'll reach an interesting ting spot. On PlayStation, we'll see those 4 classic shapes: circle, triangle, square, and cross. Advance will have swapped these out for DE, initialing Digital Eclipse. So then on Jaguar, this arced line could just be a simple shape, but given the other references, I'm inclined to say it's the arc from the old Ubisoft logo. The only featured game that breaks that format is the DOS game, where it uses the same PS1 shapes. Here's a look at Part 3 on PlayStation. There will be shrinking, bouncing, sliding, climbing, and a ton of yin-yangs. Pretty similar layouts on PC. GBA removes these ceiling tacks while bouncing, and these angry eyes near the end. And then there's Jaguar. This level is replaced entirely, giving us a completely original stage. It starts with lots of swinging. There's some sharpener platforms, a few clay knives to jump over, but the most interesting part is right at the end. We'll have a 6x4 grid of spike baskets and no apparent safe way across. But this power-up urges you to jump to it, and what do you know? You're safe. Stepping on the wrong basket will not hurt you, but kill you instantly. So how should you know what the right baskets are? Well, there's a map just before this section with sparkling dots to guide our path. Pretty clever. Part 4 of Eraser Planes will be a boss, and it's quite theatrical as it takes place in a play. The curtains will open up to Rayman on a stage, but I want to focus on the curtains themselves. The first thing I noticed is there's a lot of slowdown in the PC game, and that's not exclusive to the collection version, though I'm not sure if it's an emulation issue or just the way things are. Anyway, the curtain is lifted in 3 parts. There's waves behind the stage, and a luscious island in the background. Let's look at PlayStation. The curtain here is lower, so it makes it look like Rayman is standing on the curtain, though it lifts without issue. The rest should be the same as what we saw on DOS. Jaguar has a proper curtain placement, but it lifts up in one solid piece. There's not an island in this version either, again using the colorful cloud and rainbow background. And then we have Advance. The curtain is fine, but take a look at the waves. The water layer is strangely positioned over the stage, giving an odd look to the scene. In most versions, the first pirate will drop down from the sky and swing before landing, while the second pirate pops up and throws us a single bomb. Though interestingly on Jag, that first pirate enters the scene already swinging. How is he not dizzy after that? After the pirates, we'll meet Space Mama in all games after she blasts out of the cannon. Her battle seems the same across games, apart from the obvious screen crunch on GBA. Section 2 of Picture City will be Pencil Pentathlon. Jaguar hangs onto the same background, but the other games have this nice art supply landscape. In most games, we'll have this falling O-ring with yin-yangs to avoid. Their arrangement is different on Jag. On Advance, that O-ring doesn't even fall. We can backtrack once our cage appears, and there's a pen quirk. On PlayStation, there's 4 pens here. PC has 3, and Jag only has 2 pens here initially. This sharpener will float us across. PC adds in a cloud to make up for the extra gap, and GBA adds in a second one. Also on GBA, getting back onto these pens is made much more difficult, since the pencil doesn't rise as high as it should, as per the other games. I also found out the ballpoint won't hurt you on GBA, like it does in the others. Still looks pretty sharp though. Lastly, that satisfying bounce we get in most games will be more of a sink down effect on Jag. Spilt ink is very slippery in most games. Obviously it's not on Jaguar, and this slope is altered due to the lack of momentum. Finally, we can unlock a choir of O-rings on PS1 and PC, but on Jag and GBA, there will be far fewer of these angel O's. Part 2 of Pencil Pentathlon will have less blocking yin-yangs on GBA, and it will have plenty less pencils on Jaguar. And depending on your version, this here could either be a second paint bucket, or a boring piece of ground. The third and final stretch of the pentathlon will have this bouncy maze. This is already annoying, but it's much worse on Jaguar due to his higher jump and his increased tendency to grab ledges. Jaguar will again have fewer pencils up top. Actually, there's 0 pencils below in this game. Staying down below, there's a cubby in all games that'll either have a cage or just some tings. And for your return trip, there will be a pencil sharpener to ride back. Strangely on GBA though, there's instead a higher pencil sharpener that doesn't leave you enough room to ride it. So hopefully you've got an extra life to spare. To get to the end, you'll have 2 pens here on Jag. On PS1, you'll slide and jump. DOS and Advance will also slide, but there's some failsafe clouds below if you fall. Once we cross the finish line, we'll enter our final Picture City level, Space Mama's Crater. This is the first stage in which we have that colorful sky backdrop across all 4 games. So I guess it's time to point out one massive change. The rainbow background doesn't contain a rainbow on PC or Game Boy. How strange is that? During your climb up, you may come across a paint can or an ink bottle, depends on your version. Rayman's swinging up here gets a bit wacky on GBA. On Jaguar, your swinging range is limited. And then on PS1 and PC, Rayman lets go once he hits the wall. Oh no. Also, this swinging cage won't be protected on GBA. Space Mama 2 has even more swinging, and lots of it too. It will be dark and stormy in space on PS1, but dark and stormy over a bright, colorful scene on PC. GBA and Jag have that same backdrop, and it's a sunny day in both games. On DOS and GBA, there's an additional pencil platform here for a cage. And exclusive to the Game Boy, there's a long runway below to act as a failsafe if you fall. It also lets you bypass most of the swinging. There's some additional sharpeners later on to help you up top too. In Space Mama 3, your photographer location will depend on your game. PS1 has one here a bit higher up. You can see on PC he's absent. Jag will also have him here, but he's on an eraser ground instead of a woodblock. On PC, he has moved to just after this section. Naturally, that's empty on PS1 and Jag. Then we have GBA. He's in the PS1 location, but he's also in the PC location. Must be working double time. Let's face Space Mama again. We'll have another stage with all the same curtain quirks as before, but the scene that opens up to us is an interesting one. On PS1, we'll see a lunar landscape scrolling by as we fight. Pretty neat. Over on PC, it's the same background, but unfortunately, it doesn't move. GBA is the same, but it somehow feels more jarring. And Jag? Yeah, no space for Space Mama. For the fight itself, the washing machine won't hurt you on Jaguar. It will in all the others. Obviously, the GBA game will have screen crunch, yet it still manages to have 7 kettles across the screen with some useful overlapping. In all versions, Space Mama will have a defeat animation. Rayman will dance or pose on the PS1 or Jag, respectively, but on PC and GBA, Space Mama joins in with the groove. Nice. Jaguar goes straight to the map after. PS1 and GBA will show this image explaining Betilla's fate. And PC will show the same, but Rayman will speak in this one.
Uh-oh, Mr. Dark kidnaps Betilla the fairy.
And another black screen transition. Rayman is understandably angry. Next up, we enter our semi-final world, the Caves of Skops. Crystal Palace is first, and there's not a whole lot going on. In Part 1, you'll usually find 3 rocks here. There's 2 on Jaguar. Part 2 of the level will typically have a giant broom and a large treasure chest as decoration. They're not present on Jag. In the background, most games have this rock pillar backdrop, though PlayStation has this inner cave one. Onward to Eat at Joe's. I always liked how this was visible from the map. Once inside, we'll meet our final friend, Joe himself. On the anniversary PlayStation version, the scene retains its 4:3 aspect ratio instead of extending out to the water section that is revealed later. There's also a weird visual glitch below, cutting off the bottom of the sand layer. On DOS, things are pretty normal, but the fan is brown in this game, not blue like on PS1. GBA will have a visual oddity as well, that bright purple line across the top. Also, the table to the right won't be seen in this part. And then Jaguar, here you can see the full scene. See the extra bit of ground below compared to PS1. One more obvious difference will be the exit and end signs. None of the other versions have these, as the stage ends once enough time has passed. That timer on GBA is much shorter too. The funny thing is though, the signs aren't even necessary on Jag, since it is also time-based. But you can exit to the map if you want, or speed things up with the end sign. While you wait on PS1, you can actually hear Joe speak, much like how Betilla does in this version. We'll then get our typical intertitles. Here's PS1, and then GBA. PC, just like the other times, gives our friend some spoken dialogue. Sort of. The Jaguar game does not have this exposition. You'll see why in a minute. That firefly Joe offered will light our path through this dark level. On PlayStation, you will see it has feathered edges where the light fades. It also has a flicker to it. I really like how it interacts with the background, the shape of the illumination being altered by the darkened contours of the cave. And if you were to die, the light would fade dramatically. Over on PC, the soft light is now a hard edge, forming a perfect circle around Rayman. It does have one effect that wasn't present on PS1, and that's this amber hue resembling a dim lamplight. That hue is applied to the HUD as well, making it more immersive. Losing in this game will have that firefly spin around like crazy as it fades, and it will have a gradual growth upon respawning. On Game Boy Advance, the dark is not black, but purple, and the light will have a checkerboard transparency to act as a dithering pattern. Taking a plunge in this game will sometimes have the firefly spin, other times it won't. And then the big reveal. Yeah, on Jaguar, this stage will be lit completely. It's actually pretty weird being able to see where you're going in this stage that's usually obscured. So PlayStation has a cage here, and PC instead has a cage here. Okay, I realize that's not very helpful, so here's the level maps instead. The reason I'm showing you this though is because the Jag version has that same PS1 cage, but it also has that alternate PC cage. It's the only game to have two cages here, so there will be one missing later. Emerging from the darkness will bring us to part 3. On DOS, there will be an additional ledge to hold a cage, and on Jag, this tricky cloud will not bounce back, so you're forced to dash across this treacherous cloud bridge. Part 4 will be a loop, and along the way, we'll encounter some of the most annoying enemies in the game, the spiders. They'll shoot many stingers, and they'll follow you endlessly. But on Jaguar, these guys aren't so bad. They don't climb, and that stinger won't follow you. GBA has a good compromise. They'll act like they do on PS1 and PC, but their stingers will be more dodgeable like on Jag, and they'll only shoot when you're near. Jumping ahead to part 6, we'll return to Joe's Diner. The lighted sign will now be on in all games. The PS1 will have a happy exclamation from Joe. Also, you can now see the full extent of the ground as it's not cut off like before. And to the right is the water section I mentioned earlier. Notice how the water is transparent, but only on PS1. On GBA, you can see this table for the first time, and notice how the water comes up over the beach layer in this one. Going over the water, Joe's beach balls will have some bounce to them in most games, but on Jag, they're unbothered by our landing. Reaching this red spiky ground will have our cage in most games, though this is the one missing on Jag due to that earlier 2-for-1. Just past here on Jag, these two fish will have a bop battle, taking turns volleying Rayman side to side. This is in the other versions, but the fish are a lot less elegant with it, and not taking turns. On Advance, these angry fish aren't that great at attacking you. Once across, we clear Joe's and enter our final base level, Mr. Skops' Stalactites. On DOS and GBA, our exit sign will be up here on the higher ledge. On Jag, it will instead be down here at the bottom, so you'd probably think PlayStation has it in the same spot, right? Well, no. In fact, this version doesn't even have a sign, so there's no returning once you enter the level. This is the only traditional level here anyway, as Part 2 will be a mini-boss featuring Skops. Take a look at the DOS game with its added heat effects on the background. Not even the PlayStation version has that. Speaking of heat, the PS1 and Jag games have an orangish-red lava, but the lava on PC and GBA is straight yellow. Advance will also have an extra cloud to land on in case you miss that ledge. I don't know why, but his claw goes fast in this one. Mr. Skops will see us out in most games, but on Jag, he's gone before the end sign. Either way, we'll meet him for the proper battle. Not really any changes to report here. Finishing the fight will bring up this message on PS1, PC, and GBA, and nothing on Jag. On DOS, there's no voice, and then one final transition. Clearing this level on PS1, PC, or GBA without collecting all the Electoon cages will simply dump you out onto the map screen with no further instruction. I could see some players possibly thinking that's just the end, regardless of the message or level icons. On Jag, however, the path forward is open. It just won't let you in until you've found them all, prompting you with this message. So with that final cage broken, we have access to the final world in all games. This is a whole new world called Candy Chateau, though it only consists of one level, and that's Mr. Dark's Dare. Well, unless you're playing on Jag, where it's Mr. Dark's Chateau. Inside the chateau, you'll see we start out using a frying pan as a sled along the frosted mountains. On PS1 and PC, you'll have to time your jumps to not only avoid the pits, but also to keep your momentum up. On GBA, it doesn't feel like acceleration plays a big role, judging by how effortlessly he slides up the slopes. But it turns out the momentum mechanic is present, it's just dialed way down. With enough fooling around, I managed to slow him down enough to turn around and become stuck. Another way to get stuck is to fall into this substance here that acts as water. On PS1 and GBA, this will be yellow, almost resembling honey. And strangely on PC, it has turned green. Maybe some sort of jelly? I hope you're not sick of background swaps, because I've got one last one for you. On PS1, we'll have these ice cream torches in the back, and on PC, it'll be these elephant teacups. They'll trade backdrops in Part 3. In Part 2, though, we'll come face to face with Mr. Dark. he'll work his magic to form our doppelganger, Bad Rayman. On the GBA, we'll get this warning text calling him Dark Rayman instead. Our dastardly double will copy our every move, and if he touches us, we'll die. On PS1, you'll see he can throw a punch, but on PC, he doesn't actually follow through. You can see clearly that Bad Rayman has a dark hairdo, but on PS1, his helicopter hair will be blonde to match Good Rayman. This isn't the case on PC though, where it retains its darker hue. GBA will naturally follow the PC's trend, but there is one major exploit. You can see the spawn point for Mr. Dark's summoning here, so you know exactly where to avoid. If you manage to jump and soar over that sparkle, you can play through the whole level without being pursued. It's eerily calm now. This is possible elsewhere, though it's much harder to pull off. It's just as strange on PS1. You may have noticed I haven't mentioned the Jag version since entering the Candy Kingdom, and that's for good reason. On the Jaguar, parts 1 and 2 are replaced with entirely different levels. In part 1, instead of sledding, we'll have a full traditional level. This one acts as a maze, having us run back and forth to different sections in order to activate the next trigger point. And along the way, we'll find deranged forks, Swiss Army knives and multi-purpose tools, standalone corkscrews, and long-rolled candies, all of which are not present in the other featured versions. The water-like substance here is blue, too, instead of yellow or green. Part 2 on Jag will not include Bad Rayman, and is another normal level style, this time without even a maze. Here we'll find the small candy wrapper platforms, as well as these smiling nougat blocks. Now we're caught up to part 3 in all games, and they'll mostly be the same this time around. On Advance, we get another text prompt explaining Mr. Dark's spell. On PS1 and PC, there's no warning, and we're hit by his magic spell immediately upon entering the level. On Jag, Mr. Dark will keep some distance, waiting for us to approach. While we're under this movement spell, Rayman will look completely normal, except for on PS1, where there's a continual sparkle orbiting him, indicating the effects of the control swap. So yeah, left is right and right is left. But since this is a modern collection, there's ways to cheese this. The control mapping can put things back to normal if you don't want to deal with opposite inputs. Or, if you're playing on Switch, you can simply flip the Joy-Con itself. There will be a slight level design difference on Jag. Instead of an open pit below, there will be water, though you're losing a life either way. And on the climb up, there will be knives to punch, where there's not in the others. Once we get our normal control back, there will be 4 disappearing clouds to cross on Jag. This will be one solid moving cloud in the other games, requiring us to duck down. Just ahead, Mr. Dark will again be waiting for us, and I'll take the opportunity to grimace at him on Jaguar just because I can. This next spell puts us into an auto-run state, having Rayman run continuously long before Rayman Jungle Run. On PS1, PC, and GBA, your helicopter hair will be disabled here, but on Jag, using it is required to clear some of the large gaps. Once we reach that sign, we head to our final part of the game. Mr. Dark stole our fist, and we have to wait to get it back. We can hear that Mr. Dark has a short vocalization in most games. He doesn't on Jag. though each game is also accompanied by a taunt in the form of text. On Jag, it's in all red and in large letters. PS1 has it in teal, now with ellipses, and PC and Game Boy have a pale purple. This also matches the GBA's earlier warnings. For the fight itself, we don't actually go up against Mr. Dark, but a mashup of his henchmen. On PS1, it will light the stained glass of whichever bad guys are being fused. The other versions don't feature this visual detail. All games will start with stone Skops, but only PS1, PC, and GBA will feature Moskito Mama. Jag goes straight to Sax-Skito, but with a change. The non-Jag games will have Rayman shrink at this point, with the boss's jump sending us high into the air. Jaguar doesn't have shrinking, so Rayman will stay full size and be unaffected by the jumps. The face of Moskito will actually be the pink Bzzit in all games, including the Jag version, which is strange since it got all other Moskito instances right. Upon winning, Rayman will do his usual dance in most games. On Jag, he poses while the screen fills with the smiling Electoon icons, and a well done text comes down. This will go straight into the credits on Jag with the Rayman logo. On PlayStation, we'll get a closing cinematic with fireworks. DOS should have this, but just like the intro movie, it's not in the collection version. It will, however, show us a party image that isn't shown initially on PS1. This image will be on Advance though. On PS1 and PC, the credits roll over these post-game photos. GBA instead gives us a slideshow of them, uninterrupted by scrolling text. The credits will then be over black, just like on Jag, though on Jag, we'll have one more detail. No, not Mr. Dark. Remember those numbers from earlier in the game? Well, now we're told what to do with them. We can't actually input the numbers, since the collection doesn't have mappings for the numpad, but they thought a step ahead. Secret Game is listed at the bottom, and I'm guessing it mimics that numeral input. Anyway, we can now play Ray Breakout, a bonus game where Rayman kicks a Joe beach ball while walking on his hands. The goal is to clear all the plums. With the main game cleared and Rayman still occupied, I think this is a good point to add in a break. I initially planned to do one video skimming over the differences in versions, but mostly speaking about the collection itself. Well, as you saw, I went overboard with the comparisons, so the video is now split. So click on through to part 2, where we'll dive deeper into the more technical aspects of the 30th anniversary collection, along with some other adjacent Rayman game versions, and I'll throw in a few miscellaneous comparisons I didn't have a place for here. So, I'll see you there.